Welcome back, listeners, to the Mindful Journey podcast. I'm your host, Sana, and I want all of you to uh, maybe, and not if you're driving or something, but let's say if you are in a place, relaxed, I want you to pause with me, not just to listen, but to really reflect on something that touches all of us every single day. Guess what? The food we eat. We live in a time when the standard American diet, once considered just a cultural norm in the US, it has spread across the globe. It's a diet of speed, convenience, and also, unfortunately, processed abundance. But it's also a diet that's reshaping health outcomes worldwide, and not for the better. So, tonight isn't just about the nutrition, it's about sovereignty over our health, our choices, and even our spiritual connection to the earth itself. With us is Dr. James Kneller. He's a cardiologist who has dedicated his career to showing patients the natural, evidence based alternative to pharmaceutical dependency, while also exploring how food connects us to consciousness and integrity. So let's all lean in together and unpack how our daily choices ripple through our health, our communities, and our relationship with the planet. So, Dr. James, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really honored to have you here with us.
Yeah, thank you, Sana. That's awesome. Thank you for that kind introduction.
Super, super. Uh, so, Dr. James, talking about the standard American diet. Um, yes, I mean, it is all about speed and convenience and huge quantity and all stuff, but if we look at, it has gone global. We have fast food chains, we have processed snacks. They are as common in Mumbai or Mexico City or anywhere as they are in Manhattan. So from your perspective, what does this globalization mean for population health worldwide?
Well, I'm concerned that population trends worldwide are going to parallel what's happened in the United States over the past 50 years, over the past 25 years. The American Heart Association just published data for the United States since 1970, so the past 50 years. In America, deaths, literally deaths due to hypertensive heart disease or high blood pressure have increased by 450%.
Wow, that's,
Yeah,
I think staggering is it does underplay. Uh, four
hardly, right? Hardly does it. And deaths due to obesity related to ischemic heart disease up by 240% in men and 140% in women since 1999.
Wow.
So here in America, I think we're starting to see the consequences of the standard American diet, which has really s- come upon us since the 1970s, and what the long-term health consequences of that are. And obviously, the concern is for countries worldwide who are adopting these diet patterns more recently. You know, that's a window into what they may anticipate in future years. So, yeah, it's freaky, I don't know if you spent time in the United States, but, a lot of Americans can't cook anymore, so very expensive, very beautiful kitchens sit empty and unused. You can buy a house that, was furnished 20 years ago and, the sticker's still on the oven because no one's ever opened it or cooked anything in it. Um so there's really a decline in either people's interest in cooking or their ability to cook or both. Takeout foods, instant foods, restaurant food is just way too available. I mean, we have all these delivery services that bring it right to your door. It's not that expensive, and that's how people are eating in this country. And sadly, the standard American diet has evolved to include lots of processed foods, ultra processed foods, meaning foods that have been very very heavily manipulated that then become concentrated um, with any variety of chemicals and excessive gluten,
Hmm.
which is very concerning. And Americans have a high intake of fast food snacks, sugary beverages, saturated fats, trans fats, processed meats, which are bad. Um, Probably low quality dairy products and processed foods while skipping out on vegetables, fruits, whole grains, eating too much refined carbohydrates, lots of white bread, lots of pasta, lots of bleached rice, and it's catching up to us you know? And we've also sort of, shot ourselves in the foot in that things that used to be healthy, we can't trust anymore. Whole grains, that was always considered a healthy, diet feature. Well, now we have genetically modified grains, which are modified for higher yield, which means the grains will often have higher gluten content, 5 times the gluten content that they used to have, but the grain essentially looks the same. So people are used to consuming a certain amount of this and getting a measured response in their bodies. And now those same amounts are just piling on the fat because the food itself has changed, due to the genetic modification. And this is, I think, more rampant in the United States than anywhere else in the world, especially when you compare yourself to Europe. You go to Europe, you eat out, people are eating lots of pasta, lots of grain, lots of bread, and, they're not obese at all and not having these problems. And I think partly regulators in Europe, for example, have protected the population from allowing farmers to deviate in that direction. So our regulatory agencies have sold out this country in many respects for corporate profits, and the toll on the population is really starting to show. And those mortality statistics from the past 50 years, from the past 25 years, are really startling and staggering. And you have to fear that as other countries adopt these things, that they're going to suffer a similar fate.
Hmm. It's a grim reality. We cannot, of course, escape from it because the effects are visible. Um, and
Yeah, it's hard to travel anymore, like we've been to Europe, we've been through Asia, and you get to very remote cities, and what do you see in the airport? There's a, Kentucky Fried Chicken staring at you. And you're like, "What is Kentucky Fried Chicken doing in Istanbul?" But it made it, as did McDonald's, and it's crazy to see how these chains and brands have infiltrated worldwide. We thought that was something that would just occurred in America, and you had more of it down in the South than you do in the Northeast, but, they're making it around the world, and, how tragic and how hard to get away from anything when you go on vacation when all those things are following you.
yeah, yeah.
I'm sure you have it in India too, right?
Yes, yes, yes. I was about to say that. Uh, uh, you know, now we are looking at young children as young as 10 or 12 becoming obese. And convenience is winning over nutrition or home cooked meals. Young people who are living away from their homes, they are more relying upon packaged and processed foods. To some extent, we have even local cuisines which are now packaged ones. um
Hmm.
so uh, and of course, it's very, very formally now said, it's by the numbers and the stats that India is now becoming, or is already, the diabetic capital. So it is a global phenomenon, definitely.
Yeah, wow, and Indian food is so amazing. My wife's Indian, and when she cooks India, it's just so wonderful, you know?
Yes.
And, sad to think that that's getting replaced by by anything else. But I think, like you said, it's also changes in people's living circumstances. Maybe kids moving away too early or the family unit being disrupted. And so you have young people who aren't ready to do extensive meal preparation, and focusing on their careers. And suddenly it's achievement at all cost. And they're just reaching for, simple things to satisfy their appetite, while getting their health into trouble for the long run. I know I certainly battled that during, training, long hours in the hospital, and the cafeteria food is very cheap, or there's dispensers everywhere, and, these are the things you start to rely on to get you through long shifts or work hours, and, then the next thing you know, you start to like it and you start to feel hooked and it becomes your friend and it's not as concerning to you. Nevertheless, those health consequences are creeping in.
Mm. And do
But
you?
on a more existential on a more existential level, if you think of food as having a spirit and having a somewhat of a character, it came from living ingredients like plants. I like to think of that this processing and ultra processing of food is, highly insulting to the food itself, you know? And we're learning from quantum biology that our emotions, our expressions of gratitude change the physical properties of things around us, especially water. It's been demonstrated with water very well that the
Yes.
quality of water will improve if you are friendly to the water. Your plant will do well and grow and flourish if you speak nicely to your plant every day. And some of that is really due to the effects of consciousness on physical matter, which includes living things, plants, food, which was, recently a living thing, and even things that are more inanimate, like the water. It's been a tradition in many religions and customs to say prayer or grace before you eat. And we've always thought, yeah, it's nice to give thanks to God the creator for providing for us. But there's also the component where that expression of gratitude to the food changes the properties of the food itself or the water that you're drinking. And you're actually increasing the nutritional content and potential benefit because you took time to, be thankful and grateful for the food or the water that you're drinking. And I think on another level, the more processed the more processed the food is, where, it's becomes even harder and harder to recognize from its original self, you start to lose that spiritual capacity of the food. And we actually may be impacted by that more than we recognize.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense, because uh, it's actually a custom, a tradition here in Indian culture as well. That before sitting and eating your food, you have to pray. And apart from that, there's another aspect that is food wastage, um,
Mm.
which is, I absolutely abhor that food wastage because uh, if you are wasting food, then it's kind of, energetically you're disrespecting the farmers, uh, your planet, which are
Oh, yes.
of the food that you're going to consume. Um, uh, and I think it's gratification and convenience that is kind of uh, snatching away that gratitude towards food, the essence of it.
Mm. Yeah, that's such an important point, I even think, like, if I buy a blueberry, then I drop a blueberry on the floor, and I'm like, "Should I throw that out because I dropped it on the floor and maybe now it's dirty?" And when you think of what it took to maintain the fields, grow the plant, sprout the blueberry, pick the blueberry, package the blueberry, bring it to market, then I finally go purchase the blueberry and bring it to my house. only to have all of that end with, it falling on the floor and being declared, dirty and unfit for consumption, you know? So I agree with you in principle that food wastage is it places eating and nutrition in the wrong spiritual context. You know, we're not being grateful for the farmers and for the vast enterprise that has gone on unseen to us to, bring this nourishment to us, and then to be wasteful at that very final step is really very disgraceful and may actually be impacting us, more than we appreciated in the past.
Of course, of course.
Yeah, food scarcity, but you get enough and you stay slim and healthy because you're appreciative for the limited food that you have, but it really is enough. And then when food's in abundance and you're really eating about the same amount, but because there's so much, you're wasting a lot, but then you're getting fat and chronic disease. What's really changed? And it might be the spiritual component that we've never considered or bothered to try to measure scientifically, if it can be measured. But that might be, in fact, what's predisposing the food to chronic diseases, to causing the chronic diseases that we're now experiencing in the West.
Hmm. And do you think, Dr. James, people even realize this shift is happening to them, or has it become so normalized that it's invisible?
Yeah, I'm worried that people are distracted. You know, we are the most distracted, I think, culture or society and perhaps recent human history. With all the technology and gadgets around us and apps and programming that's coming at us and streams of data from a variety of sources, which are entertaining, may have a certain educational value. I actually think I learn a lot from my phone, but at the end of the day, it's still a distraction and it's preventing us from focusing, from living in the present moment and really appreciating what's going on right now. And it's also denying us the creative process. Consuming other people's content, no matter how well it's done and no matter how well it teaches you, denies your subconscious mind and your imagination, the opportunity to create those same, possibilities for yourself. So the distraction is certainly, a large component of what's going on, and I think the distraction contributes to our ignorance about, processed foods. And, when you think about quantum physics, 2 of my favorite principles of quantum physics is, 1, entanglement, that 2 particles that could be separated by millions of miles, and once they're entangled, they respond to each other instantaneously, even though there's, no opportunity for, communication between those particles, but due to their quantum entanglement, they respond instantaneously across large distances. That's a fascinating concept. The other fascinating concept is the role of the observer in the creation of the reality that we experience. When I went to college in engineering, the physical model of the world was very much a Newtonian model where we thought, okay, here the complex universe is kind of in motion. It's doing its thing. It's reacting to physical processes. And we really are very passive in that process. Like, we're lucky to be here. We have our chance to be on Earth. We can observe everything that's going on around us and kind of experience it, but it's really doing all of that on its own and it doesn't need us. Quantum really flipped that scenario on its head and said, "No, the conscious observer is critical to the creation of reality. That reality gets observed into existence, by the presence of a conscious observer, and for us, that we really are creating in many ways, the reality that we experience, and this is the wisdom that's behind that phrase, if a tree falls in the forest, does anybody hear it? And that's really a reference to the need for an observer for an event to be real. Like if no one observed the tree falling, and no one heard it, did it really make sound? It may not have made sound because there was no observer there to observe that physical reality into existence. And the point then being, if the observer is so important and consciousness and attention are so important for the literally the creation of reality, then what happens now when we degrade consciousness and attention, um, with all of these distractions that technology is bombarding us with, and perhaps some of the degradation in the quality of our food is the fact that we're not paying attention to it,
Mm,
and we're not observing that nutritional benefit into existence. We're not expecting it, we're not appreciating it, and it doesn't deliver. So there might be a quantum level phenomena going on in addition to just the reality of the fact that we've processed this thing and added chemicals that's detracting from our health even more.
mm. That's a very powerful point. Very powerful point, Dr. James. Um,
It's certainly interesting, right?
it is,
Very interesting.
and you touched upon a very important aspect here, which is the mindful eating. Like, are we just gorging upon, or stuffing ourselves, or we are actually activating our senses while eating the food, chewing it? So I think it's kind of looks like a uh, ancient practice right now, because I see many people, like they are really very fast eaters, uh, but it's kind of, sometimes frowned upon that, you are a very slow eater. How much time will you take to complete your food, finish your
Mm.
food? Um, but I believe that it is something to be enjoyed and feel happy, um, and kind of feel what you are eating, taste it, or maybe smell it, or uh, feel through your emotions, your feelings. So I think that's a very, very important point that you touched upon.
Oh, wow, yeah, that is good, right? The mindfulness of eating and the criticism that we place on slow eaters, you know? The restaurant needs to turn the table, so they're tapping their watch if you're kind of sitting or if you're kinda taking too long, and then, of course, the whole drive-through culture where it's like grab food in one hand, kinda eat it while you're on the road, and, yeah, it's just kinda satisfying that immediate appetite without much more thought going into it, um, is again a force that's working against us.
Yeah. And let's talk about sovereignty, Dr. James. For many people, food is their last true act of autonomy. So,
Hmm.
in, right now, when we are dominated by all these processed options, what does it actually mean to eat with integrity and sovereignty?
Well, I would say to eat with integrity and sovereignty is to make the ch you it's the power to make the choice of food selection.
Mhm.
It's the power to grow your own food and bypass the commercial option.
Okay. Okay.
It's your ability to take time to bless the food, thereby improving its nutritional contribution to your health, and
Mm.
it's your ability to stop and savor, you know? To s It's your ability to say, "No, I'm not gonna be rushed, and I am gonna take the time, and I am gonna experience this, and I do have a connection, and this is a connection to nature."
Mm.
this business of eating that I'm doing, and it's our sovereignty is our ability to choose those things and to not allow them and not to give them up. You know, everybody's trying to take them. Everybody wants your time. You're busy. You're busy. You know, eat fast. Here's some, you know, processed garbage for you to consume. And our sovereignty is our ability to choose and say no. We're not going to participate in that. Thank you very much. This is what we're going to eat, and this is how we're going to eat, and this is gonna be our routine, and this is gonna be part of our spiritual practice. So our sovereignty and our integrity is our ability to choose something else than what society's pressuring us to accept.
Hmm.
And then to be really conscious of it. To be conscious of it. Realize that the effort's there to manipulate your practice. You know, the efforts there always to influence your practice, and that you through your integrity can say, "I understand the message you're presenting to me. Thank you very much. I choose to decline that. You can keep that to yourself, and, you know, I'll behave differently." And, you know, that's at the end of the day is one of our most valuable assets, and partly why they have to keep chasing us. 'Cause we do have the ability to choose other options,
Yeah.
you know, and decide how we're going to, spend our resources. So, the fact that the advertisements still blare down on us, as annoying as that is also evidence of our integrity and sovereignty, in that we do have options to choose. So, if the industry wants us to choose their option, they'll have to pitch us pretty hard. And as much as I don't like being bombarded by advertisements, it's also reassuring to say, "Hey, I still am the entity in control at the end of the day, because it's them trying to influence me and not vice versa." But then we have to then we can exercise and say, "No, I decline. Thank you very much. I will not," and, maintain the practices that are important to us for food growing, for food preparation, for the way we eat and the time that we take in eating, for the expressions of gratitude that we have. You know, it's ours to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think,
And I think being aware of it is what's empowering. If you're when you're conscious of it, you realize, "Huh, this really is going on, and this really is who I am and what I can do." Then you start to participate it, and it really becomes real to you. Which is the value of us having a conversation like this, is that people have a chance to think about those ideas, I think, in a really clear way, and then adopt those mindful practices for themselves.
right. Now, of course, before we, uh, I want to bring in a bit of a contradiction here, uh, because, of course, opinions are welcomed. Now, some would say that Dr. James processed food globalization is progress because it creates accessibility and affordability for billions of people who might otherwise go hungry. Maybe there are people who wouldn't have, or they may not be able to afford to grow food in their homes, or buy organic, or farm to table foods, or fresh vegetables. They only have that option to buy, the processed ones, because especially because of the quantity in there. So where do we draw the line between feeding people enough and feeding people
Mhm.
well?
Yeah, that's a good point, right? When people are starving and would just be so grateful for any kind of food that they had because they don't have enough, so that, you know, that issue of scarcity was true for the United States following World War II, which is kind of when the American standard American diet, if you will, had its birth. In that America really had the issue of saying, we have a lot of people here who aren't getting enough calories, they're not getting enough caloric energy, never mind nutrition. People just don't have enough to meet their basic energy requirements.
Mm.
And so the idea of mass producing large quantities of food that have adequate caloric content and adequate taste and flavors such that people are gonna be willing, to eat those foods, became the goal of the American food industry. And that was good while we were living in conditions of scarcity. But since World War II, we're hardly in conditions of scarcity. Now food is everywhere, and we have too much too calories are too readily available, and now we have the obesity epidemic. So we clearly overswung the pendulum. Clearly overswung the goal of just sustaining people's basic caloric needs, and then through the process of refinement food manufacturers could then say, "Hey, we can make these foods taste even better, and we can do it even more cheaply, and we can make those foods last even longer on the shelf, which gives us even a greater profit margin while we chase that need, which actually no longer exists, which is to provide caloric intake for individuals." So, as the problem was solved in the United States, the calories became cheaper, tastier, and less nutritious than ever before. So the pendulum had truly swung, too far. That said, there's other places in the world that certainly haven't reached that tipping point, and basically, they're still struggling for adequate caloric intake, and caloric intake that's to meet that need, it needs to be not expensive, it needs to have a certain shelf life, it needs to be deliverable to people. And, in countries where that is the need, in places in the world where that is the need, there probably is a role for a certain amount of food processing, um, just to make individuals sustainable. I think even when we do that, though, we can keep nutrition in mind, keep cheap caloric intake in mind, limit people's exposure to unnecessary chemicals so they can also maintain their health and derive as much nutritional benefit as possible, while, satisfying their basic caloric intake. And then let's just be ready to say, when we do evolve to the point where, like in America, food is adequately available now for virtually everyone, that we're gonna overswing the pendulum just like they've done, and that's then that becomes the obesity epidemics that we're seeing in other countries, like India, for example, didn't have that before, but now we have fat people. Um why? Because those the foods they're eating are predisposing to obesity much more than the foods that they were eating in the past, and so the same serving sizes, for example, are now weaponized to cause obesity in the name of flavor, low cost, and and basic attractiveness. Nice packaging, great taste, um, and then for the manufacturer, the lower cost of producing those foods when they do it with genetically modified substances and chemicals for the sake of preservation and flavor. So, those areas that are struggling with caloric need, it's gonna be a fast tipping point to where they're next dealing with obesity. But I think we need to recognize that when caloric need is the priority, that we have to meet that need so people can at least have an adequate quality of life, not be living in hunger all the time
Absolutely.
or
That's a
repeatedly.
right, right. I think it's a very tough, but it's a very important tension. Uh,
Mhm.
because accessibility is real, but I think low quality calories, it may be a solution to hunger in the short term, but then um, triggering or accelerating disease in the long term. And when the very system which is kind of designed to feed the world, it is also mining nutrition, because of this mass production and nutrition, it really forces us to rethink what progress exactly means.
Oh, say that again, which what exactly needs?
Like progress.
Oh, what right.
Yeah.
Yeah. How is that progress, right?
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. It really in the name of progress, it becomes, exploitation.
Yeah.
You know, where a food manufacturer is able to make large corporate profits because they're shortchanging on nutrition, and they're able to buy the space on the grocery store shelves to, have their products in front of everyone at a price that people can afford, and that's all in the name of progress because these things are wonderful that they call it progress when in fact it's exploiting population health. And in the long run, we are paying for it in that death rates from these diseases in the United States, as reported by our professional societies, are have shot up in the last 50, 25 years. Um, while the system allows the corporate greed and profits to control the system, we're going to continue to suffer in that regard. And, it scares me for the long-term, viability of the country because we need a healthy population. Our children need to be educated, and they need to be active, and they need to be healthy. And I think the more and more we sacrifice this in the need, in the name of short-term gain and corporate progress profits, it's not progress at all. It's the antithesis of progress.
Mm, mm, totally, totally. So, Dr. James, when we are discussing on the status quo, what's the first step of way out or the solution? Like, what steps we as individuals can take, because we have that personal choice. But do you feel that there is a point where this personal choice of the food that we are consuming can blend or can blend with collective responsibility?
Um, I like the sound of that. I'm not sure what the last point, means exactly.
Okay, I'm just asking about first step or a solution, like at an individual level which we can do, but then it also can actually contribute to a collective responsibility.
Right. So
Yeah.
I think, even in our grocery stores overrun with processed foods, there are if you there are still the healthy options lurking there and inexpensively. For example, a bag of dried beans. When I soak those, I can buy that for $2. When I soak those and then cook them and add tomatoes and a few spices, I eat for a week, literally a week, on $2. And that won't even get you half a hamburger at McDonald's for one meal, So those basic things that we used to eat are still available in those grocery stores if you take the time to look for them. And the fruit and vegetable sections still do exist, and we can go there, and it's the most exotic things are high priced, but a lot of the basics really are not. And, I think it takes the discipline of the individual to bypass all the shiny packaging and go to those basic ingredients and to choose them because they still are in stores. And there still are farmers markets on the weekends when you can go and buy directly from the farmers. And, is the whole town at the farmer's market? Hardly. People aren't there. Why? Because they're complicit or lazy or they don't know about it or they're happy with their processed foods. But people can choose other options, and other options are available when you look for them, even in this country.
Hmm.
And perhaps our collective responsibility is to together make those choices and together support our farmers by buying from them directly at farmers markets, for example.
Yes.
And our collective responsibility is to turn off we control the corporate profits because we're the ones doing the purchasing. So when the population chooses not to purchase, that's the collective action that changes industry. And a great example of that right now is the wine industry. Gen Z suddenly is not drinking wine.
Yeah.
So now you have vineyards in France that are burning because they've been abandoned, they've died, and now they've caught fire because the demand for wine is dropping and dropping dramatically. I feel bad, of course, for wine growers, but I mean, talk about collective action. You know, the society, it controls the corporate profits because it's our money that they're after, and if we choose not to spend on those things, they will crash and burn as a result, and they'll adjust to find to deliver a product that we're willing to pay for. And so when we collectively demand healthier products, they'll have no choice but to deliver, and they will. So there's good examples of that around us, and we as a society need to push back and to say no to the sugar and the unhealthy fats and the highly processed foods and snacks and processed meats and that's bombarding us, but that we're being complicit in paying for.
Right. Great. And also, if our listeners they would like to connect with you, what will be the easiest way?
Yeah, so the best thing is to visit my website, which is www.naturalcardiologyinstitute.com. All one word, naturalcardiologyinstitute.com. There's a lot of my activities. I'm on on the website, also at naturalcardiologyinstitute.com, on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook. I have a YouTube channel, James Kneller MD. My name, James Kneller MD. All one word is my YouTube channel. Lots of great content on there. I'd be delighted for anyone to follow me and keep in touch and reach out. We're launching as we speak lines of natural health products to lower cholesterol and to treat high blood pressure. Um, I'm very excited for those and the impact that those are going to have on population health by bringing multiple natural ingredients to people in a way that's convenient, affordable, and a pleasure to take. So we're working hard to reverse the disease process of coronary artery disease and hypertension, which we know is killing Americans, and doing that naturally. And all of that information and those products will be available through our website. So I would encourage all of your listeners to please follow us on social media and visit our website to see what we have coming up for you.
Brilliant. Congratulations, Dr. James, and I'll make sure
Thanks.
I have all the links in the show notes. And I must really thank you for this rich and very, very thought provoking conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. James, for doing this. Much needed.
Yeah, it's not a fun, wonderful to connect with you. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And as we wrap up, listeners, I want to leave us with this. Food isn't just fuel, it's identity, it's medicine, it's memory, it's our spirit. The globalization of the standard American diet may feel inevitable, but our choices are not powerless. Every meal can be an act of resistance, an act of sovereignty, an act of love for ourselves, for each other, and for the earth that sustains us. With this has been the mindful journey. Until next time, eat well, live well, and stay connected to what truly, truly nourishes you. Thank you.